The cemetery grass was still damp when Howard Castellano pulled me aside. My husband Daniel had been in the ground for less than 2 hours. I was still clutching the folded flag they had given me, still feeling the weight of the rifle salute echoing in my chest. People were walking back to their cars, their black clothes disappearing into the gray afternoon. "Maya, we need to discuss the house," Howard said, his voice low but firm. He didn't look at me when he spoke. His eyes were on the parking lot, already moving forward while I was still trapped in the moment. I blinked at him, confused. "The house. Daniel's property reverts to the real family now," he continued. "You understand, don't you? Blood relatives. That's how these things work." My breath caught. Real family. As if our 12 years together meant nothing. As if the nights I sat beside Daniel's hospital bed, holding his hand through the pain, had been some kind of performance. Howard's wife, Patricia, stood behind him with her arms crossed, nodding along like this was perfectly reasonable. I should have cried. I should have collapsed right there on the wet grass. Instead, something cold and clear settled over me. I smiled softly and said, "Of course. I understand completely." Daniel and I had met at a community art gallery fundraiser when I was 31. He was a history professor with kind eyes and an easy laugh. I was working as a legal assistant at a small law firm, saving money and dreaming of bigger things. We married 6 months later in a simple ceremony at the courthouse, just us and 2 witnesses. His parents hadn't come to the wedding. Howard had sent a brief card saying they needed more time to adjust. Patricia never even acknowledged it. They lived 3 hours away in the same town where Daniel grew up, and they made it clear I would never be welcome there. But Daniel didn't care. He chose me. He chose us. We built a life together in the house he had inherited from his grandmother, a beautiful old Victorian with a wraparound porch and a garden that bloomed every spring. He poured his love into that house, and so did I. For 12 years we were happy. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 4 cancer. Aggressive. Unstoppable. Daniel fought for 11 months, and I fought beside him every single day. Howard and Patricia showed up during the final weeks. Not to help. Not to comfort their son. They came to inventory the house. I would catch Patricia opening drawers in the guest room, running her fingers over the antique furniture. Howard would stand in Daniel's study, examining the bookshelves like he was appraising them. "Just reminiscing," Patricia would say when I found her in our bedroom, looking through Daniel's closet. But I knew better. They were planning. They were already dividing what they believed would soon be theirs. Daniel was too weak to notice, and I didn't want to burden him with it. So I said nothing. I smiled politely and brought them tea they never drank. The night before Daniel died, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "You're going to be okay." I made sure of it. I thought he meant emotionally. I thought he was trying to comfort me. I didn't realize he meant it literally. Daniel had always been 3 steps ahead, always thinking, always protecting me. Even in his final days, he had been planning. After the burial, I drove home alone. The house felt too big without Daniel. Every room echoed with his absence. I walked through the hallways we had painted together, past the framed photos of our life, and into the kitchen where we had spent countless mornings drinking coffee and talking about nothing and everything. Howard's words kept replaying in my mind. Real family. Blood relatives. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall, feeling anger rise in me like a slow burn. They had ignored Daniel for years. They had rejected me from the beginning. And now they wanted to erase me completely, to take the only thing I had left of him. I stood up and walked into Daniel's study. His desk was neat, organized the way he always kept it. I opened the top drawer and found what I was looking for. A sealed envelope with my name written on the front in his careful handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter and a key. The letter read, "My dearest Maya, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I imagine my father has already made his intentions clear. I've known for years what he would do if he ever had the chance. He's always seen you as an outsider, And he's never forgiven me for choosing my own path. But here's what he doesn't know. Grandma Rose left me the house in her will, yes. But I transferred ownership to you 3 years ago. The deed is in your name. The house has been yours since our 9th anniversary. I wanted you to have security no matter what happened to me. The key in this envelope opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Inside you'll find all the documents you need. My father will try to take everything from you, Maya. Don't let him. You are my real family. You always have been. All my love. Daniel. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I started laughing. Not from joy, but from the sheer brilliance of it. Daniel had known. He had seen this coming and had quietly, carefully protected me. Howard and Patricia had no idea what they were walking into. The next morning Howard called. His voice was brisk and businesslike, the tone of someone who expected immediate compliance. Patricia and I will be coming by tomorrow to begin sorting through Daniel's things, he announced. We'll need you to start packing your personal items. We're planning to list the house by the end of the month. I took a slow breath, letting silence fill the space between us. Then I said very calmly, "That won't be possible." "Excuse me. The house isn't part of Daniel's estate," I explained. "It's not yours to sell." There was a pause. I could almost hear him frowning. "Maya, I don't think you understand how inheritance works. Daniel was our son. The property is mine," I interrupted. "The deed is in my name. Has been for 3 years. If you'd like to verify that, you're welcome to check with the county records office." The silence that followed was long and cold. Then Howard's voice came back, sharp and angry. "We'll see about that." He hung up. I went to the bank that afternoon. The safety deposit box was exactly where Daniel said it would be. Inside, I found the deed with my name clearly listed as the sole owner. There were also copies of the transfer documents, all signed and notarized. Daniel had been meticulous. But there was more. Another envelope, thicker this time, filled with financial statements. Daniel had kept records of every dollar his parents had borrowed from him over the years. Howard's failed business ventures. Patricia's shopping debts. The loans that were never repaid. Tens of thousands of dollars, all documented with dates and bank transfers. And then, at the bottom of the box, I found a flash drive labeled, "For legal use only." I took everything home and spent the evening going through it all. The flash drive contained email exchanges between Howard and Daniel. Messages where Howard demanded money, guilt Daniel into helping, promised repayment that never came. And then, more recently, emails where Howard discussed contesting the will with Patricia, planning how to claim the house. Daniel had known. He had been quietly building a case, protecting me from something I hadn't even seen coming. 2 days later, Howard and Patricia showed up at my door unannounced. Patricia pushed past me without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes already scanning the living room like she was measuring it for new furniture. "We need to talk about this ridiculous claim you're making," Howard said, standing in my entryway with his arms crossed. "There's nothing to discuss," I replied calmly. "The house is mine. I have the legal documents to prove it." Patricia laughed, sharp and bitter. "Daniel wouldn't have done that. You're lying. You probably forged those papers after he died." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not lying. And I'm not leaving." Howard stepped closer, his face darkening. "We are his parents. We are his blood. You were just his wife. You don't get to steal what belongs to our family." Just his wife. The words hung in the air like poison. I looked at him, at this man who had barely spoken to his son in years, who had shown up only when he smelled opportunity. And I smiled. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "They didn't leave easily," Patricia argued, her voice rising into shrill accusations. "Howard threatened to call the police to sue me, to make sure I never saw a penny of Daniel's money." I stood in the doorway and repeated the same phrase over and over. "This is my house. Please leave." Eventually they did. But not before Patricia hissed, "You haven't heard the last of this." I closed the door behind them and locked it. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I was angry. Angrier than I had ever been. These people had abandoned their son, had treated me like garbage, and now they wanted to erase me from the life Daniel and I had built together. I picked up my phone and called the lawyer Daniel had recommended in his letter. A woman named Veronica Hale. Her voicemail said she specialized in estate disputes and family law. I left a detailed message and asked her to call me back as soon as possible. She called within an hour. Veronica Hale had a calm, confident voice that immediately put me at ease. I explained the situation, and she listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Send me everything you have. The deed, the transfer documents, the financial records. I'll review them and we'll meet tomorrow." I spent the evening scanning and emailing documents. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. I sat in Daniel's study, surrounded by his books and his notes, and felt him there with me. He had known this would happen. He had prepared me for this fight. The next day, I met Veronica at her office downtown. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She spread the documents across her desk and studied them carefully. "This is airtight," she said finally. "The house is yours. No question. But your in-laws are going to fight dirty. People like this always do." "What do you mean?" She leaned back in her chair. "They'll try to prove undue influence. They'll claim you manipulated Daniel into transferring the property while he was sick. They'll drag this out as long as possible, hoping you'll run out of money for legal fees and give up." I felt my stomach drop. "Can they win?" "No," Veronica said firmly. "But they can make your life hell trying." Veronica was right. Within a week, Howard and Patricia filed a lawsuit contesting the property transfer. Their lawyer claimed I had coerced Daniel while he was mentally compromised by illness. It was absurd. Daniel had transferred the house 3 years before his diagnosis, but they were counting on the court not caring about timelines. The local newspaper picked up the story. Family feud erupts over professor's estate. Suddenly, people I barely knew were offering opinions. Some supported me. Others whispered that maybe Howard and Patricia had a point. The gossip was exhausting. But I wasn't backing down. Veronica filed a countersuit for harassment and demanded they repay the money they owed Daniel. The financial records I had found painted a damning picture. Howard's business failures. Patricia's credit card debts. All funded by their son, who had quietly supported them for years while they treated him like an obligation. When the court papers were served, Howard called me furious. "You're trying to humiliate us," he shouted. "No," I said calmly. "I'm defending myself. You started this." He hung up without another word. The preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, life felt like it was happening in slow motion. I went to work at the law firm, answered phones, filed documents, and pretended everything was normal. But every night, I came home to an empty house and the weight of the fight ahead. Daniel's colleagues from the university reached out. Many of them had heard about the lawsuit and wanted to help. Professor Amelia Thornton, Daniel's closest friend, showed up at my door one evening with a casserole and a sympathetic smile. "Daniel told me about his parents," she said as we sat in the kitchen. "He knew they'd do something like this. He made me promise to look after you if anything happened." I felt tears prick my eyes. "He thought of everything. He loved you," Amelia said simply. "More than they ever deserved to be loved by him." Over the next few weeks, more of Daniel's friends came forward. They offered to testify, to provide character references, to stand beside me in court. These people, Daniel's real family, showed me what loyalty looked like. The hearing arrived on a cold morning in October. I wore a simple black dress and sat beside Veronica in the courtroom, my hands folded in my lap. Across the aisle, Howard and Patricia sat with their lawyer, a stern-looking man named Frederick Moss. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, reviewed the case files before calling the court to order. Moss stood and delivered his opening argument, painting me as a manipulative opportunist who had taken advantage of a dying man. He claimed Daniel had been confused and vulnerable when he transferred the property. Veronica stood next. Her voice was calm and clear. Your Honor, the property transfer occurred 3 years before Mr. Castellano's diagnosis. At the time, he was a healthy, fully competent adult. We have the medical records to prove it. This transfer was a gift to his wife, executed legally and with full awareness. She placed the deed and transfer documents on the judge's bench. The judge studied them carefully, her expression unreadable. Moss called Howard to the stand first. Howard sat stiffly, his face red with indignation. Moss asked him to describe his relationship with Daniel. We were close, Howard said, his voice tight. He was my son. We talked regularly. Veronica stood for cross-examination. Mr. Castellano, when was the last time you visited your son before his diagnosis? Howard hesitated. I'm not sure. A few years, maybe. 5 years, Veronica corrected. You didn't visit him for 5 years. Is that your definition of close? Howard's jaw clenched. We lived far away. It was difficult to travel. But you managed to visit once he was dying, Veronica said coolly. In fact, you visited multiple times in those final weeks. Why the sudden interest? He was my son, Howard snapped. Veronica smiled slightly. Let's talk about the money you borrowed from him. Over the past decade, Daniel loaned you nearly $60,000. How much of that did you repay? Howard's face went pale. That's not relevant. Your Honor, I have bank records documenting every transfer, Veronica said, holding up a folder. Mr. Castellano borrowed extensively from his son and never repaid a cent. The judge leaned forward. I'll allow it. Patricia was called next. She sat on the stand with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face pinched with anger. Moss asked her to describe Maya's relationship with Daniel. She was always controlling, Patricia said. She kept him away from us. She made him stop calling, stop visiting. She wanted him all to herself. Veronica stood. Mrs. Castellano, did you attend your son's wedding? Patricia's lips thinned. No. Did you ever invite Maya to your home for holidays? No. Did you ever send her a birthday card? Christmas gift? Any acknowledgement that she was part of your family? Patricia's silence was answer enough. Veronica continued. Mrs. Castellano, you claim Maya isolated your son. But the truth is, you rejected her from the beginning. And when Daniel chose his wife over your approval, you cut him off. Isn't that correct? That's not, Patricia started. Yes or no, Veronica pressed. Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. We didn't approve of the marriage. Veronica nodded. So you abandoned your son because you didn't like his choice. And now you want to take his home from the woman he loved. Does that sound like family to you? Patricia said nothing. Veronica called me to the stand. I was nervous, my hands trembling as I swore the oath. But as I sat down and looked at Howard and Patricia across the courtroom, I felt Daniel beside me, steadying me. Veronica asked me to describe our marriage. I spoke about the small moments. The Sunday mornings we spent reading in the garden. The way Daniel would leave notes in my lunch bag. The nights we stayed up late talking about our dreams. I didn't cry. I didn't falter. I just told the truth. Moss stood for cross-examination. He tried to paint me as calculating, suggesting I had pressured Daniel into transferring the house. But every time he asked a question I had an answer. Veronica had prepared me well. Did you know about the property transfer when it happened? Moss asked. No, I said. Daniel surprised me with it on our anniversary. He said he wanted me to always feel secure. And you expect us to believe you didn't ask for it. I didn't need to ask, I replied. Daniel loved me. He wanted to take care of me. That's what people do when they love someone. Moss had no response. Professor Amelia Thornton testified next. She spoke about Daniel's character, his kindness, and his clear devotion to me. She described how he had confided in her about his parents' disapproval and his decision to distance himself from them. Daniel was one of the most intelligent, thoughtful people I've ever known, Amelia said. He didn't make decisions lightly. When he transferred that house to Maya, it was because he trusted her completely. He wanted her protected. Other colleagues followed, each one painting the same picture. Daniel had been mentally sharp until the very end. The property transfer had been deliberate and loving. And his parents had been absent from his life for years. By the time the testimonies ended, Howard and Patricia looked small and defeated. The courtroom had heard the truth, and it wasn't the story they had tried to sell. The judge called for a recess to review the evidence. I sat in the hallway with Veronica, my heart pounding. She looked calm, confident. "We've got this," she said quietly. When court reconvened, the judge delivered her ruling. Her voice was firm and clear. "After reviewing the evidence, I find no basis for the claim of undue influence. The property transfer was executed legally, with proper documentation, and at a time when Mr. Daniel Castellano was fully competent. The deed stands. Mrs. Maya Castellano is the rightful owner of the property." Relief flooded through me. I felt Veronica squeeze my hand. Across the aisle, Howard and Patricia sat frozen, their faces pale with shock. But the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore," she continued, "I find the plaintiff's conduct in this matter to be deeply troubling. They have attempted to exploit their son's death for financial gain while showing clear evidence of estrangement and financial dependence. The countersuit filed by Mrs. Castellano regarding unpaid loans will proceed to a separate hearing." Howard stood abruptly, his face red. "This is ridiculous. She manipulated him." The judge's gaze turned icy. "Mr. Castellano, you will sit down and remain silent, or I will hold you in contempt." Howard sat. The courtroom was silent. The judge dismissed the case. It was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. The case had garnered attention, and now they wanted a statement. I stood on the steps with Veronica beside me and spoke calmly. "Daniel was my husband, my partner, and my best friend. He made sure I would be taken care of, and I will honor his memory by living the life we built together. That's all I have to say." As I turned to leave, I saw Howard and Patricia standing near their car, watching me. Patricia's face was twisted with bitterness. Howard looked defeated. For a moment I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then I remembered how they had treated Daniel. How they had ignored him until they needed something. How they had tried to erase me from his life even after he was gone. My sympathy evaporated. I got into my car and drove home. The house was waiting for me, warm and familiar. I walked through the rooms, feeling Daniel's presence in every corner. He had protected me. He had fought for me even when he couldn't be here. And I had won. The second hearing for the unpaid loans took place 2 months later. Howard and Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that the money had been gifts, not loans. But the emails Daniel had saved told a different story. In message after message, Howard had promised to repay the money. He had called them loans himself. The judge ordered them to repay $35,000, the amount that could be clearly documented. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Howard and Patricia left the courtroom looking broken. Their attempt to take my home had cost them more than they ever expected. Veronica shook my hand outside the courthouse. "You did good, Maya. Daniel would be proud." Smiled. I couldn't have done it without him. Life slowly returned to normal after that. I went back to work, tended the garden, and started volunteering at the community art gallery where Daniel and I had first met. I wanted to honor his memory by living fully, by not letting grief consume me. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Patricia. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single page, handwritten. "Mia, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness. Howard and I were wrong. We were greedy and cruel, And we hurt you when you were already suffering. Daniel loved you more than he ever loved us. I see that now. I wish I had seen it sooner. I wish I had been a better mother to him. But I wasn't, and I have to live with that. Hope you find peace. Patricia. I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it in a drawer. It didn't change anything. It didn't undo the pain. But it was something. An acknowledgement. A small, fragile step toward closure. I never wrote back. Some wounds don't need to be revisited. Some apologies are best left unanswered. A year after Daniel's death, I stood in the garden we had planted together. The flowers were blooming, vibrant and wild. I had added new plants, new colors, but kept the structure he had designed. It was our garden, still ours even though he was gone. Professor Amelia stopped by that afternoon with iced tea and gossip from the university. We sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the trees. She told me about the memorial scholarship they had established in Daniel's name. It would help students studying history, the subject he had loved so much. He would have been so proud, I said. He already was, Amelia replied. Of you. I thought about that as the evening stretched on. Daniel had been proud of me. He had trusted me to carry on, to fight, to stand my ground. And I had. I had honored his love by refusing to let anyone diminish it. That night, I sat in his study and wrote a letter of my own. Not to anyone in particular. Just words on paper, a way to process everything that had happened. Dear Daniel, it's been a year since you left. Some days it feels like a lifetime. Other days it feels like you were just here, laughing at one of my bad jokes or reminding me to water the tomatoes. Your parents tried to take everything. They tried to erase me, to pretend I didn't matter. But you made sure I was protected. You gave me the tools I needed to fight back, and I did. I won. We won. The house is still ours. The garden is blooming. And I'm learning how to live without you, even though I don't want to. I'm learning that grief and joy can exist in the same space, that I can miss you and still move forward. I hope wherever you are, you know how much I love you. How much I'll always love you. Forever yours, Maya. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer with Patricia's. They sat side by side, two pieces of the same complicated story. Then I turned off the light and went to bed. 2 years after Daniel's death, I started teaching workshops at the community art gallery. Nothing fancy, just beginner painting classes for adults who wanted to try something new. It was Daniel's idea originally. He had always said I had an eye for color, a gift for seeing beauty in ordinary things. The classes were small at first, just a handful of people. But word spread and soon I was teaching twice a week. I loved it. I loved watching people discover their own creativity, seeing them light up when a painting came together. One evening, a woman named Claire approached me after class. She was in her 60s, recently widowed, and struggling to find purpose. How do you do it? She asked. How do you keep going after losing someone? I thought about her question for a long moment. Then I said, you honor them. You live the life they wanted for you. You don't let grief steal your future. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you. As I drove home that night, I realized I had become the person Daniel always believed I could be. Strong, independent, unshakable. He had seen that in me before I saw it in myself. 5 years after Daniel's death, I stood on the porch of our house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The garden was lush and thriving. The house was filled with memories and love. And I was at peace. Howard passed away that year. I heard about it through a mutual acquaintance. Patricia sent a brief email, letting me know the funeral details. I didn't go. It felt like closing a door that had already been shut for a long time. I thought about Daniel often, but the grief had softened. No longer felt like drowning. It felt like carrying something precious, something I would never put down but had learned to hold gently. I had rebuilt my life on the foundation he had given me. The house was mine. The future was mine. And every day I chose to live fully, to love deeply, to honor the man who had protected me even in death. Howard had been wrong. I was real family. I always had been. And Daniel had made sure the world knew it.